Hi, welcome to my channel. For today's video, I am going to be sharing my February reading wrap up. So in the month of February, I got through 14 books. I'm excited to talk about them. I read some really amazing books this month. I also read some that were like a little bit average, so I feel like this was a pretty mixed month of books that I read, but I found some that I really loved and found a new all-time favorite, so I'm so excited to go through these books. I'm just gonna go ahead and share each book, what they're all about, and give my short little review and rating of them. I feel like I did like an okay job at sticking to my TBR for the month. I read quite a few books that were from my TBR, so I'm happy about that. But the first book that I read was Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This was technically on my January TBR, but I finished in February obviously, so it's going on my February wrap up. So this is the third and final book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and I was so excited to read it. I actually did a reading vlog for it, so I'm not going to share too much of my thoughts on it because I have that reading vlog up on my channel. It's a spoiler-free reading vlog if you want to know a little bit more about what I thought about it, but I'll share what it's all about. So basically the series follows three brothers. They're billionaires. They're trying to get their inheritance that their grandfather left for them when he passed away, so he leaves them with different tasks that they have to do to get that inheritance. And so the brother in this book is Cal, and he has to go live in their family's lake house for the summer and then sell it at the end of summer. And so when he gets there, he runs into Alana. She is his childhood friend who he dated at one point. They were very in love and he broke her heart, and so she's living in the house and her name is also on the house. So she doesn't want to sell it, but he has to sell it to get his inheritance. And so the story just kind of goes from there. Obviously this one is a second chance romance, which I love that trope. I also love the childhood friends to lovers trope, so I was really excited for this book. I think I was a little bit too excited for it. That was kind of my main thing with this one, was I feel like my expectations were a little bit too high and it just wasn't as like amazing as I thought it was going to be, because I really love the second book in this series, so I was kind of expecting it to be even better than the second one, and it just wasn't. I just didn't love it as much as I was hoping that I would, but I did still really enjoy it. I still had a good time reading it. It was still a good book, so I did still rate it 5 stars. So this next book that I read, I am so excited to talk about it because this is one of my new all-time favorites. It is my top read of the year so far. I loved it so much. It was such an amazing book, and that book was The Right Move by Liz Tomford. So this book was just everything. I loved it. I was completely obsessed with it. It was just so good and it was just so cute and so sweet. I'm not gonna get over it. This is gonna be my new book that I don't shut up about and constantly bring up and constantly recommend. It is part of a series. It's book 2 in the series. The first book was Mile High, which I actually read that one in January and I talked about it back in January. So this is the sequel to Mile High, but it does follow different characters, so it can be read as a standalone. But Mile High was a good book, so I would recommend that one too. But this one was even better than Mile High. I just loved it so much. So this book follows Ryan and Indy. Ryan is the brother of the main character from Mile High, and then Indy is her best friend. So it has the best friend's brother trope. And so Indy doesn't have anywhere to stay right now, and so Stevie, who is her best friend and Ryan's sister, asks Ryan to let Indy stay with him in his apartment because he is a professional basketball player, so he's pretty much never home because he's always at practice or on the road for games and stuff. So she goes to her brother and asks if Indy can stay with him temporarily. He's kind of against it at first because he is a very like reserved guy, doesn't really like to have people in his space, but eventually he agrees to it. He decides to help her out, and so he starts living with her. But he's been dealing with trouble with the basketball team because he is the captain of the team, and the general manager doesn't really like him, doesn't really approve of him as being the captain, mainly because he doesn't really have a very good like work-life balance. So he decides to lie to the manager, and he tells him that he actually does have a girlfriend and he does kind of have a life outside of basketball, and he tells him that his girlfriend is Indy. And so obviously it goes from there. The two of them start fake dating and eventually start to fall for each other for real, of course. So this book, like I said, it was just so good. I loved it. I loved everything about it. These characters were amazing. Indy was just such a sweet and likable character. Like I loved her. I loved her personality. It has kind of like the grumpy sunshine trope, and Ryan is obviously just a very like reserved person. He doesn't really get along with her at first because of her personality, but he starts to love her for it, and I just really loved the way he loved her. He just treated her so well and just did so many nice things for her. Like he just really showed how much he loved her, and I just really loved that about this book. Honestly, I could go on and on about how amazing this book was and how much I loved it, but I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, if you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. It was so good. Like I said, it is my favorite book so far this year. I'm sure I'm going to talk about it so much more in the future. I'll definitely bring it up again at some point. But yeah, this one is obviously a 5-star read. So the next book that I read was The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I have a whole review video for this book, so that's up on my channel if you want to know a little bit more about it. That one is also a spoiler-free video, but basically it follows this girl named Emily. She is a junior in high school, and and it's Valentine's Day, so that's kind of why I read this book. I wanted a cute little Valentine's Day story right before Valentine's Day, and so she's excited because she's just planning to have this perfect day with her boyfriend that she's been dating for a few months now. But she goes to school and her day just starts to go horribly wrong. All these horrible things start happening to her, and to top it all off, she catches her boyfriend cheating on her. So she's obviously upset about that. She eventually goes home, she falls asleep that night, she wakes up the next day, and it's Valentine's Day all over again. And so she just starts reliving the same day over and over again. And through all of that, she runs into one of her classmates. His name is Nick. She just keeps running into him each day, and eventually she starts to get closer to him with all their interactions that they have. So this book was adorable. I really loved it a lot. I thought it was just so cute, so fun to read. I loved all the Taylor Swift references in it. Like I said, I have that review video for it, but I rated this one a 4.5. So my next few books that I'm going to talk about, I also made a video talking about all of these. I did a video earlier this month that was what I read in a week. These next like 5 books were included in that, so again I won't go too in depth with them. But the next book was Cupid's Peak by Lee Jacot. So this is a novella. Again, it was like a Valentine's Day novella, but basically it's a story about this girl who gets set up on a blind date by her sister, and when she shows up to the date, it's this guy that she knew in high school that was like the popular guy that she had a huge crush on, and she was friends with him in high school. Like, she tutored him, and they both kind of had a thing for each other, but they just never like did anything about it, never said anything, so nothing really came of it. But it's 10 years later and they obviously run into each other again, and they were set up on this blind date together, and it kind of just goes from there. It's basically just like their date and like the night following their date. And this one was just basically a spicy novella. I thought it was really cute in the first half. Like, you get a lot of like their background, like what happened with them in high school, and just kind of like them interacting now and getting to know each other again. Like, I enjoyed reading the first half of it, and then the second half was just kind of boring to me. The second half was basically all spice, and I just didn't really care. It was super short though. It was only like 100 pages. The next book was Wild Ever After by Rebecca Genshak. Again, this one was part of my reading vlog that I did. So this one is a hockey romance. It's also a marriage of convenience. So it follows Jade and Declan. Jade was about to get married to her fiance, and then the week of their wedding he breaks up with her, and so she works for a bridal magazine. So she's been writing all about her wedding, and basically her boss tells her that this wedding needs to happen somehow. Like, she can't call off the wedding now because her job is kind of depending on it. So she's talking to Declan one night when her and her friends are out with a few of the hockey players. This is part of a series, but they're all standalone. So like the past books were about her friends and their romances with the hockey players, so that's why she knows Declan. So she's talking to Declan, she's telling him her whole issue that she's having with her job and how she needs to find someone to marry her, and Declan offers to marry her, and it basically goes from there. Obviously it's a marriage of convenience. They have to be married for at least a year, but eventually they start to fall for each other. So I was really excited for this book because, like I said, it is part of a series, and I really enjoyed the first 2 books in the series. I think this one started off really good, but then the second half was just not as good as the first, so I was a little bit disappointed by it, but I ended up rating it a 3.75. The next book was one that I listened to on Audible, and it was Coming Home by Kennedy Ryan. This is just a short novella. It's only available as an audiobook, but it basically follows these 2 people that were really good friends in college. They always kind of had like this thing between them, like they kind of liked each other, but nothing really came of it. And now it's years later, they're like in their 40s now, and they both have gone on to have really successful careers. So it's the week of homecoming at their university, and they're both invited back to do an interview together. So they reunite, and it basically goes from there. They just spend this weekend together where they kind of realize that this connection that they had when they were younger is still there. So this one was cute. I love Kennedy Ryan, so I thought this one was enjoyable. I liked listening to it. The next book that I read was Sunny Disposition by Deanna Gray. Again, this was part of my reading vlog video. So in this book, the 2 main characters end up becoming roommates. They live in the same house together, but they're also online friends. They met through like video game streaming, I'm pretty sure. And so he realizes right away who she is, but she doesn't know who he is. And so it's kind of like the whole hidden identity trope, and it basically just goes from there. There's kind of a lot more to this book, but I don't want to give too much away with it because I feel like it could be kind of considered spoilers if I go into too much of what happens and what it's about. But I liked this one. I thought it was cute. It was an enjoyable read. I do think it's another one where it started off good. I kind of got bored in the second half. I still enjoyed it, and so I ended up also rating this one a 3.75. And so the next book that I read was again part of that reading vlog video. This one was the last one that was part of that video, and that was Hail Mary by Candy Steiner. So this book is another sports romance book, but this one is a football romance, and it is part of a series. It's part of the Red Zone Rival series. So this is the 4th and final book in that series, and this one follows Leo and Mary. I feel like this book was very similar to the last one. It's a lot of the same tropes. Honestly, a lot of the books I read I feel like were very similar tropes and ideas and stuff that were happening, but in this one they're also roommates, and they also met when they were younger, when they were in high school, and they met through video games. And so basically in high school she had a huge crush on him, and he did something that kind of broke her heart, and so she's just hated him since, but now they live across the street from each other. But then the pipes burst in her house and she can't stay there for now because the owner of the house needs to obviously fix everything up, so she doesn't have anywhere to go, and Leo offers to let her stay in their house because they have an empty room. So she takes him up on the offer because she really has no other options, and he's letting her stay there for free. So she's living with these football players for the summer, and obviously she really hates Leo, but he has like no idea what he did. He doesn't know why she hates him so much, so he's just kind of trying to get closer to her, but she wants nothing to do with him. So yeah, that is the main premise of this one, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked this series so far. This one's probably my second favorite in the series. I just really liked the storyline of it, and I liked the characters. This one I rated it a 4.5. I just thought it was enjoyable. I didn't really love the third act conflict, but the rest of the book was good, and I did enjoy reading the rest of it. So the next few books I'm going to talk about, I also did a video for them. They are all like dark romance books, and I did a dark romance Rex video recently. So again, I won't go too in depth with them because I have that video where I went a lot more in depth on these books and kind of gave my review and everything for them there. But of course, I'm going to still briefly talk about them. So the first book is Brutal Obsession by S. Massery. So this book is another college hockey romance book. This one is also a dark romance, and it's a bully romance. So in this one, the two main characters are Violet and Grayson, and Grayson is a hockey player, Violet is a dancer. Basically one night there's an accident that happens that involves the both of them. Grayson ends up getting into a lot of trouble, and so a few months later Violet goes back to school and Grayson now goes to the same university as her. They both hate each other, so he decides that he's going to make her life miserable. So this book, I don't even know how I feel about it still. I've gone back and forth so much on it, but it was very entertaining. Like, I couldn't put it down. I don't know. I rated it 4 stars. Mainly for that reason, just the fact that I couldn't put it down. Like, I kept wanting to read and like know what was gonna happen. I'm still trying to process it, even though it's been like almost 2 weeks now since I read it, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it was definitely just an interesting read. Please check trigger warnings for it because it is a dark romance. But the next book that I read was another dark romance, and that was Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. So this one was another pretty dark book, dark for different reasons than Brutal Obsession was. But in this book, it follows Cora and Dean. So Dean is Cora's sister's fiance, but she's always hated him. They have just never gotten along. But one night they're all out celebrating her sister's birthday. She stays out late while everyone else goes home, and then she ends up needing a ride. No one answers their phone, and Dean is kind of like her last resort. He comes and gets her from the bar that she's at, and they end up being followed and kidnapped that night. And so of course they go through a lot of really horrible and traumatic things that just completely change their lives and change their relationship that the two of them have. So this book was a very dark and heavy book to read. It was just very heartbreaking. A lot of it is about like the aftermath of them being kidnapped and kind of how they deal with that and learn to heal from the trauma of that. So this one I did really like it, so I rated it at 4.5. And so the next book that I read that again was part of my video of like dark romances was Pen Pal by J.T. Geisinger. So this book was just really crazy. It was not what I was expecting at all, but I ended up loving it. But basically it follows this woman named Kayla. Her husband just passed away, and shortly after that she starts receiving letters from this man named Dante who is writing her from a prison, and she just starts writing back and forth with him, but she has no idea who this man is, and he kind of sends her some weird letters, but he kind of becomes like her pen pal, I guess. It basically goes from there. I don't want to give too much away because I just think this one is one that you just need to go in not knowing too much about it. It just makes it so much better when you read it that way. But this one was just, like I said, not what I was expecting at all, but it was still a really good book. I really liked it. I feel like I was kind of prepared for it being such a crazy book because I read Perfect Strangers by her, but this book is nothing like that one at all. They're very different books. Like I said, I have that video, so I definitely went a lot more in depth on it there, but this one was a 5-star read. Next, I continued on with the ACOTAR series, and I read A Court of Frost and Starlight. This is a very short book. It's like basically a novella almost. What even happens in this book? Like, it was honestly, it was boring. Honestly, it just basically follows all of the characters from the ACOTAR series, like kind of in the aftermath of what happened in book 3. That's kind of it. I feel like this book is just mainly meant to like bridge things over to the next book, it seems, so I can see that that's kind of its purpose, I guess. I listened to the audiobook, so I just got through it like really quickly, but even with the audiobook, like it was boring. I didn't really care for it, and I was looking at like Goodreads reviews, and it seems like that is the general consensus. I had been doing reading vlogs for each of the books in the series. I was gonna do one for this one one just because even though it was really short, I was like, I guess I'll just do one anyway. But I pretty much just read it and felt like I had nothing to say about it. So yeah, I just obviously ended up not doing that. Also, it switches point of views, which I don't really mind, like switching from one character's point of view to another one, but I didn't like that it switched from first person point of view to third person point of view. That just annoyed me. I don't know. I just didn't really like that. Didn't really care for this book. I mean, I didn't like hate it either. It was just fine. I just decided to give it like a 3-star rating. So the next book that I read was Glove Save by Tegan Hunter. This is another hockey romance book. This one follows, I don't remember their names. Clearly it wasn't a very memorable book. He went by his last name, Greer. I'm pretty sure his name is Greer, and her name is not coming to me at all. I know her sister's name. Oh wait, her name was Stevie. Yeah. Okay, so it follows Greer and Stevie. Greer is a professional hockey player. I'm not sure if I said this, but this is part of the Carolina Comet series. So this is like book 6 in the series, I'm pretty sure, but they can all be read as standalones. And so Greer plays on the hockey team, and Stevie is the sister of the main character from the book that comes before this one. That's how they kind of connect and like know each other. And so Stevie is also a single mom. Basically in this book, Greer's mother is about to get married and he needs a date for the wedding because his mom told him to bring a date. And so eventually, I don't know if Stevie offers or if he asks her, but she ends up agreeing to be his fake date for the wedding if he gives her daughter hockey lessons. And so that's basically what happens. They start to spend a lot of time together because she takes her daughter to do hockey lessons with him, and then eventually she ends up going to this wedding with him, and obviously they start to kind of have feelings for each other, but he is very against relationships. Like, he doesn't believe in love, so that's kind of where the conflicts come up in their relationship. So this series, honestly, I feel like as it's gone on, it's gotten not as great. Like, the first 3 books in this series, I actually really enjoyed them, but then the last 3 that came out, I didn't really like them as much. The series isn't over yet. There's still another book. I'm still gonna continue on with it. I do like these books, but like I don't love them, you know? Like, they're just kind of fun, quick, entertaining books to read, but they're not like amazing or anything. This one I think actually started off really good. Like, I actually got very into this book. I remember I started it and I thought I was just gonna read like a couple chapters, but then I actually ended up getting really into it and reading like, I think about like 100 pages maybe. So it started off good. I think like the second half was like not as great. Again, with this one, I feel like I keep saying that with a lot of the books that I read this month. I don't know, just like the ending of it, I feel like, I guess it was just kind of rushed. I just didn't really love it. It was just an average book overall, but I enjoyed parts of it. So I just decided to rate it a 3.75. I feel like it was almost a 4, but like I said, the ending just kind of felt rushed and just like happened all of a sudden. I just didn't really care as much for the book by the time I got to the end of it. So the last book that I read in February was Heartless by Elsie Silver. So I finally read this book. It's been on my TBR since like October, I'm pretty sure. I think that's when it came out. I've been wanting to read it and I finally got to it. So this book is part of a series, but it's a standalone. It's the second book following Flawless, which I read last summer, and I really loved that book, so I've been excited for this one. So this book follows Cade and Willa, and Cade is a single dad and it's the summer, so now he kind of needs help with his son. So he's been looking for a nanny. He's gone through so many interviews and he just hasn't found anyone that he likes. And then Willa's best friend, she's the main character from the previous book. She is obviously part of the story now. She's engaged to Cade's brother, so she tells him that she has someone who could potentially be his nanny, and she's obviously referring to Willa. So she invites Willa to come to their town and obviously see how things go, see if she could potentially be a good nanny for his son. So they had actually met before he like officially meets her as his son's potential nanny, and because of their initial meeting, it kind of like left a bad impression on him, so he's a little bit hesitant to hire her as the nanny. But his son immediately loves her, so he eventually agrees to have her be his nanny, and she agrees to stay and everything. So that's kind of where the story goes. She's gonna stay there for the next 2 months to watch over his son, but the two of them are also very attracted to each other, and obviously they can't really do anything about that because she is working for him. So this one was a really cute book. I did really love it a lot. I did just finish it, so I kind of feel like at this point I liked Flawless a little bit more. I do think that this one was kind of a better book than Flawless, but I liked the storyline of Flawless more. Like, I just thought it was more interesting. I really loved that book. I mean, I really love this one too, but like, I don't know, I'm not like the biggest fan of like the nanny trope, so I guess that's kind of part of why I didn't love this one as much as I loved Flawless. And also, I did see a spoiler for this book before I read it. I didn't like realize it was a huge spoiler, but it's kind of like the big thing that happens in the end, like kind of the main conflict in the end, and I saw a spoiler for it on TikTok. So I kind of already knew it was going to happen the whole time. Like, I knew where the story was heading. It didn't like affect it too much, but I do feel like I probably would have enjoyed this book a lot more if I hadn't known like what was going to happen and where the story was going. But I did still really love the characters. I loved the relationship between Willa and Cade. Like, I just loved them together. It is an age gap book. She's 25 and he's 38, so that's part of it too. And then I also loved the relationship that Willa had with his son. Like, he absolutely adored her and she loved him just as much, and it was just really sweet to read that. And also just seeing obviously them all come together as like a family in the end. So this one I ended up rating it a 4.5. So those were all the books that I read in the month of February. I feel like I read a lot of like the same tropes, and I read a lot of sports romance, but I feel like I also had a pretty good reading month. I know it was a little bit mixed, but I also feel like I read some really good books too. But yeah, that is it for this video. Definitely let me know any of your thoughts on any of these books, or let me know what you read in February. And if you liked this and you're new to my channel, I would love it if you would subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.